It's Victory Monday, Colts fans. The Indianapolis Colts knocked off the Houston Texans yesterday, but we're all wondering what's next for Anthony Richardson as the rookie suffered a concussion in the win. How did the Colts pull off the victory? And what's to make of the Richardson injury? Let's talk about it. Welcome to the Horseshoe Huddle Podcast presented by Fan Nation on SI.com, part of the Fans First Sports Network. My name is Andrew Moore, and I'm joined here as always by my fellow writer, colleague, and co-host of the Horseshoe Huddle Podcast, Drake Wally. Back in Indiana after traveling all across the United States, went to South Carolina, went to Tennessee, checking out some family. Good to see you back in Indiana here, Drake, and celebrating a Victory Monday for the Indianapolis Colts. How you doing, bud?
Yeah, it was. I'm doing great, man. It was a nice family trip, and we did get to see the Indianapolis Colts get a victory in Tennessee, which is always fantastic. Because last time my parents were up here watching the game, it was the Carson Wentz left-handed pick six game that nobody wants to talk about. So it's nice to get a win. Hey, you know what? We got a lot to talk about, and we have a lot to address, a lot of updates to give. So thank you, everybody, for dealing with me being in two different states. I'm back home, and I'm ready to talk some Colts.
Let's talk some Colts. True is in the chat already. Has it been 2 years since we've been 500? It seems that way. I know it's been since 2021. I don't think the Colts were over 500 last year. And we'll certainly get to what we know currently about Anthony Richardson, which, spoiler alert, Shane Steichen's keeping everything close to the vest, and he probably will all week. The CFO is in the chat. Yesterday was the first multi-score Colts win in 637 days from Patrick here. He's coming for your job stats, Matt. We see you here. What's up to you, my brother?
That's a crazy number.
Yes, he's coming for your job. 637 days. That just kind of shows you how rough it's been for the Colts over the past couple of years. But guys, let's dive right into it. Obviously, if you haven't done so already, we ask you to go follow us on all of our social medias, like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook, follow at Colts on FN on Twitter, and subscribe to the Horseshoe Huddle YouTube channel. Hit that bell so you know whenever Drake and I go live, whenever Shad goes live with the Saddle Up Show, so you never miss an episode. And if you can't catch us live, Apple, Spotify, Google, and even here on YouTube, you can catch us anytime you want. So subscribe, give us a 5-star review. Really makes us happy, makes us reach more Colts fans just like you. All of those good things. We really appreciate everybody's support. Eric is in the chat. Hell yes, fellas, what a win. Exactly. And we're going to dive right into that here, Drake. I put this as the graphic. The Colts dominate the Texans 31-20 because honestly, it was dominant. The score maybe was like, oh, well, it's 11 points. Well, considering the Colts were up 14-0 with 9 minutes left in the first quarter, didn't seem like the game after that was really in doubt. The Colts had a good hold on this game from the kickoff, and it started with that great drive down the field by Anthony Richardson. But honestly, all around a really solid victory for the Indianapolis Colts. So Drake, I'm going to kick it on over to you, buddy. What was your gut reaction, or what is your overall feel of this Colts win?
You know what? I really like the term that you use, dominant, because like you said, sorry, I got a neighbor doing renovations out there. So if you hear a saw, that's, I can't really help that. But I was going to say that it's really refreshing to see such a group victory. I think even Zaire Franklin, put out a post on X about it, that it was a great team victory. And, I really do think that they dominated, because at one point I think they were up 31-10. And I mean, they really commanded that game, especially from the defensive front. I know that, here's the thing though, disclaimer, the Houston Texans were absolutely peppered with injuries. I mean, in really key spots with really good centerpieces for their team, not even able to play, guys like Laramie Tunsil and such. And CJ Stroud admirably played, he played pretty admirably for not having much protection. But man, they really brought the pain up front. I loved it. We're going to talk about the secondary later. Might need to address some things there, but overall, man, from top to bottom, even with Richardson getting hurt, Minshew goes right in there and doesn't even miss a beat. Just a great coaching game, great team victory, and the Colts really need to be happy about that.
really any division win. I mean, I know it's people are going to say that it was just the Houston Texans, right? But any division victory, especially by 10 points or more, I think that's a good victory, especially when you're talking about a young Colts team that's trying to put everything together. So are the Texans, so it was a it was a good measuring stick for where this team was. And obviously, your starting quarterback goes down, doesn't really play much past the first quarter. Things could really blow up. But Gardner Minshew came in, ran the ball with Zach Moss. The defensive line was stout, and they really pushed the Colts to a victory. So, I mean, the Colts have to enjoy these because, I mean, you think about last year, Colts tied the Texans and lost to the Texans. So if people really want to complain about that, it could definitely get much worse. This Colts team definitely has some things to work on, but you should definitely enjoy a division victory when the Colts looked like the better team for the majority of the afternoon. So obviously, we're going to start off with this Colts analysis with Anthony Richardson and Drake. Boy, did Richardson start out hot. That very first drive leads the Colts right down the field, 10 plays, 75 yards, runs it in for an 18-yard touchdown. Colts defense comes up, makes a stop, gets the ball right back, and on that very first play of that possession, Anthony Richardson, again, 15 yards to the house for his second rushing touchdown of the day. Really hard to start out better than what Anthony Richardson did on Sunday. His final stats: 6 of 10 passing for 56 yards, 35 yards, and 2 touchdowns rushing. But obviously, the talk about Anthony Richardson right now is that concussion. So on that second touchdown run, he was heading towards the end zone, slowed down a little bit. All of a sudden, Texan safety MJ Stewart comes like a rocket, tries to put everything he has into hitting Anthony Richardson. Richardson still makes the touchdown, but if you watch that replay, his head snaps back, hits the ground pretty hard, and then after a couple series after that, Richardson self-reports concussion-like symptoms. They evaluate him in the blue tent, take him back to the locker room, and obviously he's done for the day. So Drake, before I let you dive into this, we have our first super chat of the day, and it's from Patrick. Patrick said, the CFO of Horseshoe Huddle says, can we hold out Richardson until week 5 where he and Jonathan Taylor can run out of the tunnel at Lucas Oil together and beat the Titans 52-10? That would be quite the scene if all came together, where Richardson came out firing on all cylinders. Jonathan Taylor magically repairs his relationship with the Colts and they go and stomp on the Titans. But Patrick, I don't know how realistic that one is, buddy.
Yeah, but I mean, look, you would hope that that's going to happen at some point. I think that if Richardson can go, you want to see him out there, especially, I mean, my goodness, Lamar Jackson versus Anthony Richardson. Whew. Talk about a heck of a matchup right there. But yeah, man, that'd be pretty interesting. But I do got to say, I do like the idea of Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor on the same field together.
Yeah, I do too. It would be a sight to watch. A healthy Jonathan Taylor and a healthy Anthony Richardson together would be fantastic. Patrick, Drake and I appreciate all of your support as always, buddy.
You're the man.
And hey, you're gonna at this point, Drake's gonna have to invite you to his wedding because you're gonna be the one that's funding the wedding at this point. But thank you so much, Patrick. You're one of the good ones, buddy. Let's give a shout out to Nomadic Brian, Josh Fancher, Wombat, Larry Brown, all of you guys in the chat as well that I see coming in. It's great to see all of you guys here on this Victory Monday. But Drake, going into all this, what did you think about not only the Richardson hit that caused the concussion, but just his performance in general? Because man, AR came out firing.
Yeah, and you look at the passing stat line, you see, I think it's 6 for 10, 56 yards passing. He was like 5 for 5, coming out of the game. I mean, he was 5 for 5. That dude, or something close to that, he was barely missing. He was hitting on all cylinders throwing. And Houston looked completely confused out of the gate on what to do with him. Like, they did not understand what to do with him. Again, they were banged up in the secondary. I mean, bad. They were missing Jimmy Ward, Jalen Petrie. But to go out there in the first 5-6 minutes of the game, have 3 carries for 35 yards, 2 rushing scores, and a long of 18, it sucks that he got hurt, because you're thinking, what in the hell could that stat line have looked like by the end of that game? I mean, that's a phenomenal start, and you can tell Steichen knows exactly how to use Richardson. The offensive line is syncing with him better. I think that with Zach Moss back there providing a little more of a constant, it could have been a really huge scoring game. I mean, the Colts could have blown them out like over 40 points potentially with Richardson staying in the whole game. So while he was in, man, he looked fantastic. Loved it.
And they really didn't have an answer for the quarterback run game. I mean, Shane Steichen was definitely in his bag, because that second touchdown run where Richardson fakes the handoff to Josh Downs and then he keeps it himself. Fantastic blocks by Michael Pittman Jr. and Kylan Granson. By the way, shout out to Kylan Granson. The kid gets his first touchdown of his NFL career. I'm going to give the man his kudos. That's what I've been waiting to see. Congrats to Kylan Granson getting into the end zone for the very first time in the NFL. But I digress. The Texans really had no answers for Anthony Richardson. Obviously, things started to slow down after the concussion hit kind of took place, and Anthony Richardson didn't really feel right after that. But it was going to be a big game if I think for the rookie if he wouldn't have gotten hit like that. But obviously, the concussion happens. He's now in the concussion protocol and will have to pass that 5-step protocol before he is cleared to play this weekend, as the Colts head to Baltimore to take on the Ravens, a 2-0 team that have looked pretty good this season. So it's going to be interesting to see if Anthony Richardson can really get to that spot where he can clear concussion protocol. And now, Drake, I hated to bring this up, and I didn't really want to write about this last night, but 2 games into his career, 2 times Anthony Richardson hasn't been able to finish the game. And not only is it now knee pain or ankle pain from the hits from the Jacksonville Jaguars, this is a concussion now. And concussions are weird injuries where sometimes you can get over them very quickly. Other times it can take you a month or more to get over a concussion. They're no joke. So is there a cause for concern for Anthony Richardson here, not only just with the injuries, but do you think he's going to be able to really learn how to protect himself? Because I think if he wants a long career with the Colts, that's got to happen, and that's got to happen fast.
Yeah, I think there's reason to be concerned for an interesting, point, like an interesting subject is the reason. I don't think that it's that he's had 2 concussions or 2 issues with brain, potential brain injuries. Because if you're talking about like a 10-year career, you're talking about in his 5th season, this is his 2nd concussion, maybe even in like 3 seasons. That's still cause for concern. But we're talking his 2nd game, man. Like in his first 2 games, he's taking hits that are significant enough to take him out of the game. I haven't seen that in recent memory. Actually, I'm not saying that he's an outlier in that regard, but it is very, very, interesting and weird that it's happening this fast. So I do think you got to figure out 2 things. At times you got to slide. You just have to get down. And at times, like on his touchdown run where he got blasted, he needs to know where his body's at on the field. Okay, he didn't have to get down necessarily. I actually had someone tell me that on Twitter on X, and it made a very good point. So he's just got to get better body awareness. He's 6'4". They had a graphic up where he is bigger than the average. I think it was defensive back, average linebacker, some cases defensive ends. He's bigger than those guys, and this dude can gallop 4.43 in a 40-yard dash. That's absolutely scary as hell, and it's harder to tackle and deal with as a defense. So he's confident in his body. He used to do this in college. He's got to adjust and realize that these are freaking missiles getting launched at him. These aren't, little pellet gun, types of situations. These guys are going to hurt him if he doesn't take care of himself.
He's learning very quickly the difference between a college hit and an NFL hit. And I don't want to act like this is all Richardson's fault, because it isn't,
Oh, no.
These guys are trying to take him out, whether it was a cheap shot or not on MJ Stewart. I'm not really going to go down that line. And quite frankly, it doesn't even matter, because the hit still happened and Anthony Richardson still got a concussion. There's going to be cheap shots in the NFL. Peyton Manning took cheap shots throughout his entire career. So did Andrew Luck. Anthony Richardson is going to face that same exact thing because these guys see this mammoth human being that is Anthony Richardson, and they're going to want to try to give it their all to try to bring this guy down. You know, I mean, MJ Stewart's trying to go after Anthony Richardson. He hits him hard enough. What if Anthony Richardson drops the ball and before he crosses the pylon, goes out of the end zone for a touchback? Same thing that just happened to Justin Jefferson on Thursday Night Football. So he's got a job to do as well. But what Anthony Richardson, I think, needs to do, and this is going to be like every single game this season, it's going to be a learning experience for Anthony Richardson. Number one, you cannot slow down when you're heading to the end zone. I don't care if you think you're going to get in, you run that 4.43 speed, you get on your horse and you get into the end zone. He did start to slow up. He didn't see MJ Stewart coming until it was too late. And Michael Pittman even said that after the game, but this is a learning moment for him. Do not slow down when there's a chance that you could be hit. You have the speed, you get in the end zone and you protect yourself. And this will be another thing too. Do not take unnecessary hits. It is okay to slide. It is okay to go out of bounds and live to fight another day. Peyton Manning even told him this before that first game. Trevor Lawrence has told him, protect yourself because the hits just aren't the same. You have to get, if you're going to go over that end zone, you sprint to that end zone as fast as you can. If not, you get down, you protect yourself. Because Drake, this is something that I think we're both in accordance on here, is this rookie season is supposed to be a developing year for Anthony Richardson. He can't develop at the pace that he wants to develop and at the pace the Colts want him to develop if he's sidelined on because of injury. He's got to be out there getting those live reps. Otherwise, they're not going to get to the spot that they want to, and I can very easily see them getting to because of how fast of a start Anthony Richardson has already started off with this year because he's injured. So again, this is a teaching moment for Anthony Richardson, a learning experience that you have to always be aware of your surroundings, and sometimes it's better to fight another day. On that particular play, you obviously don't want him sliding down at the one, but you do want him sprinting toward that pylon and getting out of bounds and out of harm's way as fast as possible.
Yeah, and look, man, he's in hostile territory too. You know, he's at another team's stadium, and this is a team that just got scored on the previous drive, and he did a little shimmy dance in the end zone. So I mean, these guys were, probably a little bit pissed, and they wanted to get back at him a bit. Like you said, cheap shots happen, and like you said, there's also a chance that he didn't cheap shot him because he was looking for a potential. We've seen it. Guys are celebrating, and guys at the 1 yard line swat that ball away, or they tackle him because guys are just a little too quick in their celebrations or slowing down Richardson with the ladder. So I personally don't think it was a cheap shot. I personally think that it was just a guy that was probably a little bit pissed off, number one, and he thought that maybe there's a chance that I can take him out. It is a little suspect, though, I guess, that it was in the end zone, but that's neither here nor there. At the end of the day, you want Richardson on the field. The best development for him, number one, there's a lot of steps, but the first step is you got to be available, and that's really a skill in the NFL. We've seen it with Eli Manning, Brett Favre, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady. I mean, we've seen it with the greats.
The best ability is availability. I've said that for years now, and I will continue to say it. So there hasn't been any update on where Anthony Richardson is with the concussion protocol. Shane Steichen kept everything very close to the vest. The next update we could possibly get is on Wednesday when the Colts do practice. We'll see if Anthony Richardson is out there at practice. It could be possible that he is. I'm not going to say whether to expect him out there or not. I do know that multiple Colts players said that he was in good spirits and feeling a lot better just after the game already. So hopefully that's a good sign. But hopefully we get a better update on Wednesday when we do speak to Shane Steichen and can kind of see where Anthony Richardson is at that point. So shout out to some other people coming in here. Tim, Steve, Larry Brown, and Logan Schmidt. The GOAT is in the house. Good to see you, buddy, as well. And as Stats Matt brings up the final point before we move on, guy was running down the goal line. Anthony Richardson should have been past him without slowing down. And you're exactly right there, Stats Matt. So, but Drake, Anthony Richardson went out. Gardner Minshew came in and played. pretty damn well for Gardner Minshew. 19 of 23 for 171 yards and a touchdown, led the Colts to 17 more points on top of the 14 that Anthony Richardson got the Colts in the first quarter. And this is why you have Gardner Minshew. You have that stable, really good backup quarterback that in case Anthony Richardson goes down, you have a capable backup to come in and can still win you the game. And that's what Gardner Minshew did.
Yeah, and this I believe it was I can't remember who wrote the piece from our site on why this is exactly why the Colts.
It was Jake Arthur.
Okay, so yeah, Jake Arthur, the great one, wrote that. So look, man, this is what we were talking about. We said this is the best insurance policy you could potentially have. I mean, I would challenge someone to name a better backup quarterback than Gardner Minshew. I mean, he's started so many games and he's got such a great touchdown to interception ratio, takes care of the ball, knows the offense. He walked in and it's like Philly all over again, only a different set of players. He knows exactly what he's doing. And I know that Houston was down some really important players, but think about this. You go from a guy that they were completely lost on. Okay, they had no clue what Richardson was going to put up over 40 points. Okay, period. It was just going to happen. And he started getting incompletions after the concussion, the potential, concussion, whatever you want to call it. Minshew comes in. He is not the runner. Okay, a defense is not worried about him running. He is not the deep ball guy. Okay, he's not going to beat you running or throwing on the run either. And he just went in there. You'd think that it's going to be an easier matchup for the Texans. He just went in there and picked them apart with accuracy and little, death by 1,000 cuts type of approach. And that opened up the ground game. And that opened up more confidence in the offensive line. He was hitting guys all over the place. He was hitting literally multiple receivers. Wasn't over-targeting one guy. Of course, Pittman led like usual. But, man, he was hitting every single receiver out there, it seemed. And he even hit Zach Moss, who is not typically a receiving threat, for like 4 or 5 catches. So I thought Gardner Minshew proved exactly why he was brought in for this backup job. But I will say he might be worth more than $3.5 million on a one-year deal after just coming in and being an absolute constant. They didn't miss a beat, and you got to give him credit. He basically ran the offense, and he ran it incredibly well.
Listen, I would not be mad if the Colts offered to double his salary to be the backup quarterback for the Colts for the foreseeable future.
Go for it.
Because I mean, this is why you bring Gardner Minshew in, plain and simple. I mean, he's obviously, if you have him as your starter, he's going to be a very low end starter. That's just the ceiling for Gardner Minshew. But he's still a low-end starter. So when he's a backup, he can come in and he can win you some games. You're right, Drake. It wasn't anything spectacular. It's not like he lit up the Texans for 300 yards on offense or anything like that. But he came in, he made efficient throws. He did not put the ball in harm's way. Obviously, 19 for 23. He was able to make those easy completions and just keep the offense afloat, keep it stabilized. So there wasn't a massive or drop off where the Colts couldn't move the ball at all once Anthony Richardson left. No, Minshew was able to get it down the field, score some points, and keep the Texans at bay. And that's exactly what he has brought in here to do. Number one is be a mentor to Anthony Richardson and support him. And number two is if these situations do arise, you can trust that Gardner Minshew is going to run that offense in a manner that it's supposed to be run. Now, would I put my money in Gardner Minshew winning a shootout against the Baltimore Ravens next week or possibly the Los Angeles Rams in 2 weeks? Probably not. You'd probably want Anthony Richardson, your big guns out there for those matchups. But for Gardner Minshew to come in and do what he did, again, he doesn't receive any of the starting reps during the week. They're all going to Anthony Richardson to make sure he's prepared. For him to step in without any reps with those starters, thankfully he had those throughout the preseason and training camp, but he came in and did a very solid job and just kept his Colts offense moving.
And he did his job. He knows he's a backup. I mean, obviously he even said that, he was a little bit, bummed that he didn't win the starting job and that Anthony Richardson did, because I mean, he's still a professional at the end of the day. He still wants to make, money, but he's a unique backup because he knew he was coming into this situation, and all he's done is teach Anthony Richardson while trying to get the job too. So he's just a perfect teammate. He's a perfect presence in the locker room, and it's good to see him go out there and win you a game, and especially right away. And in a situation where you're like, oh my gosh, man, it's a different quarterback out here, and he doesn't have all the weapons and tools that Richardson had. But what he does have over Richardson is NFL knowledge, probably knowledge of the offense because he's been with it for now his third season. And he also is more accurate, period. He's more accurate. So at least right now. So it's like it all added up and he did his job and you got to be proud of him. It makes you feel safe. If Richardson does have to miss another game or so, with this evaluation, it makes you feel safe. And I agree with you, man. I think that they should absolutely look to maybe give him a bigger contract, lock him down for a couple of years, keep him here.
And you know what else was nice to see? The return of the Colts running game on Sunday. Zach Moss made his season debut, and the Colts certainly welcomed that. Zach Moss played 98% of the snaps at the running back position. I think he was out for one snap of all of the Colts offensive snaps on Sunday, which in today's NFL is just absolutely unheard of because you hear running back by committee and all this stuff. Zach Moss was the running back yesterday, and he put it all together. 18 carries for 88 yards and a touchdown for Zach Moss in his return. Boy, did the Colts need that. And you could just see the difference between what the running game looks like with Deion Jackson versus what it did this week with Zach Moss. And it was a pretty noticeable difference. And it solidified Zach Moss as this team's running back until Jonathan Taylor returns.
Yeah, and it really, for him to go out there and play so well, I know that the last time he actually played was against the Houston Texans, had a pretty good game against them too, and they were banged up again. But look, the Colts offensive line, first off, they went out there and they played well. All right, they did their job. They opened up lanes, but Zach Moss was patient. I saw patience. I saw him wait at times for that hole to open up, and then he put on the burners. He wasn't running into linemen. He wasn't making bad reads. He was finding those gaps, and he was taking advantage. He was taking full advantage of all of his opportunities. He almost averaged 5 yards a carry, and this is something that we talked about. It's fascinating because he was not only did he have most of the snaps and almost all the snaps, he was the only running back that got any carries. He was the only running back, I think, that even caught a pass. I mean, he was just the dude. And he went out there with a backup quarterback, him being a backup running back, at least in this offense right now. If Jonathan Taylor's back in, right now he's established himself as the clear number one running back until Taylor returns, if he returns. And they have Jackson, they have Funk, and he was the only guy that got any carries, targets. And you got to be impressed with his efficiency for him to be out there all those snaps and take full advantage of those opportunities.
Well, he was the only running back that got any offensive snaps, period. I mean, Deion Jackson and Jake Funk, the only snaps they got yesterday were on special teams. So there's quite a gap between the running backs right now. Shane Steichen said that since Zach Moss was hot, they were just going to ride the hot hand. But you could see there was a noticeable difference from week 1 to week 2, and not just with the running backs, but I want to we got to talk about this offensive line, Drake, and we got to give them their kudos. The offensive line in the first 2 weeks, I mean, especially in the pass protection, phenomenal. Colts did not allow a sack yesterday. They've only allowed 4 sacks so far. 2 of those were because Anthony Richardson ran out of bounds just behind the line of scrimmage. So if you want to say actual sacks, it's only been 2 so far. Nobody got close to Anthony Richardson or Gardner Minshew yesterday. Those guys were absolutely dealing and dominating the line of scrimmage. And I mean, shout out to Will Fries, who had a fantastic game. Shout out to Bernard Ryman, who after 2 games, 0 sacks allowed, only 1 pressure in 85 pass blocking snaps. So this Colts offensive line is really starting to gel and come together, Drake. This is what we wanted to see, and this is something that needs to continue down the line. Obviously, we're only 2 games in, still real early, and there's a lot of tough opponents left to come on the Colts schedule, but you have to be encouraged by the start from this Colts offensive line and just how the unit has performed as a whole.
Yeah, hey, I think that it was recently announced. I don't know if they're talking about the game against Houston or if they're talking about the first 2 games of the season. But Ryan Kelly currently is the highest graded center in the entire NFL. And this is a guy who was thought to be regressing. I thought at times he was regressing. But right now, this dude's playing like his ass is on fire. I mean, he's playing incredibly well. Obviously, there's still 2 games tonight, 1 happening right now. But man, you got to be impressed with that too, because he is really the heartbeat of that. I mean, everyone talks about Nelson. He might be the most talented Okay. But this is the heartbeat of the offensive line. That's the center. That's the guy making the calls, the shouts. He's changing things. He's making the reads. And so it's just like you got to be really happy with the whole offensive line. But, man, it really gets me stoked for Ryan Kelly's season. This could be maybe a comeback season of sorts for him.
And before we move on here, Stats Matt coming out with the stats saying Will Fries was the only offensive guard to receive a grade above 90 in week 2, according to Pro Football Focus. As you said from Larry Brown, PFF has Ryan Kelly as the number 1 center in the NFL. This offensive line is really starting to put things together. And this is what you want to see. You want the continuity. You want to see the improvement out of guys like Bernard Ryan and Will Fries. And just stacking those good games on top of one another, so this doesn't have to be a sticking point or a cause for concern any longer. If the Colts can just get back, I don't know if the Colts will ever be back to the peak 2019, 2020 that they were when Anthony Costanzo was in there. I mean, hell, if Bernard Ryman continues to ascend and becomes the next Anthony Costanzo for the Colts, maybe we'll be talking differently here in a year or two. But the way that the Colts offensive line played this weekend, fantastic. And if they can keep this rolling, I think the Colts offensive line is going to be just fine for what they're asking out of this offense, not only in the running game, but in the passing game as well.
Yeah, and it gets you. This is exactly what made them so dominant and made Carson Wentz. I'm not saying that he didn't have good plays, made him look good. It really helped Jonathan Taylor, even though he's a dynamic back. It helped him really shine in 2021. And so, if they can continue this kind of play, and Anthony Richardson returns, it's going to assist with his development like absolutely on the highest of levels. And that's potentially his best friend as an offensive line that can actually do the job.
Now, Drake, let's move on to the defensive side of the ball here, because that defensive line, another solid game. They were absolutely dominant against a very banged up Texans offensive line. So it's maybe not surprising that they played this well, but they took care of business up front, and that's exactly what you wanted to see. The Colts only allowed 2.0 yards per carry average from the Texans on Sunday, 6 sacks. And I let me see if I can get all of them. Samson Ebukam had one, Kwity Paye, DeForest Buckner, Taven Bryan, Jacob Martin, and EJ Speed. I think those were all 6 guys that had sacks of CJ Stroud. And yes, CJ Stroud did throw for a lot of yards, but boy, DeForest Buckner said last week that we have to continue to pressure and have constant pressure on the rookie quarterback. That's exactly what they did on Sunday, Drake.
Yeah, and 5 of those sacks obviously came from the defensive front. And Taven Bryan, again, I mean, the guy is doing a good job as a rotational piece. And you mentioned, especially in the pass rush, very athletic. He's showing his worth. I will say, though, I know Zaire Franklin still had 13 tackles, which, by the way, I don't know. I think I've seen 17 and 18 for the first game. So I'm just going to go with the higher one because I love Zaire. But whether it's 30 or 31 tackles, that's absolutely ridiculous. Like, that's bonkers. And he's leading the league in
NFL
overall and individual tackles. So bravo to him. Julian Blackmon at a safety position had 10 tackles. That dude was involved at, just to say it at the slightest. But EJ Speed really stood out to me, man. He had 6 tackles. He had 2 tackles for loss. He shot the gap and read a miscue from the offensive line and almost took off CJ Stroud's head. So, I mean, this defense played good. And Grover Stewart, again, 5 tackles, Kwity Paye, 5 tackles, a sack, a tackle for loss. I mean, that defensive front looks absolutely ridiculous right now. You want to see more from the secondary, which we'll get to. But, man, you got to be impressed with the linebackers and that defensive front. They look absolutely on fire right now.
I tell you what, when Kwity Paye went down on Sunday and had to be looked at by the trainers, that thought entered my head. Oh boy, here we go again. Another Kwity Paye injury. He's going to be out for a couple games, and we're going to have to restart this all over. Thank God he came back into the game, gets another sack. That's 2 in 2 games for Kwity Paye. The double-digit sack season for Kwity Paye is still alive and well, and at this point, he's going to get it by week 10. So, I mean, keep things rolling. But Drake, Samson Ebukam, He's coming. I mean, there's our colleague Zach Hicks put together a phenomenal film room on Samson Ebukam's performance yesterday of the Houston Texans. So go to horseshoehuddle.com and check that out. But the number of pressures, he only had one sack yesterday, but the number of pressures and the amount of times that he affected CJ Stroud without getting a sack, astronomical. And this is what I was talking about. This is what we discussed in the offseason, Drake, when we talked about Ebukam is he's getting those starting reps. He's getting that 65, close to 70% of the defensive snaps at that Leo position. And he's got a sack. He had a big tackle for loss against the Jaguars. Things are starting to pile up. And if this continues, it's going to be a Denico Autry signing all over again, where really underrated signing. But man, he's going to be an absolute weapon on the defensive line.
Yeah, I mean, we've said this a bunch. You'll take that. Holy cow!
Oh yeah.
It still haunts me to see 96 on the Titans. So at the end of the day, though, what's really impressing me about him is I mean, obviously he's playing great, but it's the run defense. He affects the running game so much for a team. And this is a team that has Damian Pierce, a guy that is, in my opinion, a bulldozer. He's like a wrecking ball. And so the fact that they were able to hold him to, I think it was 15 carries for 31 yards and a long of 10. So that means he had 14 carries for 21 yards, basically, outside of that 10-yard run. So that has absolutely got to make you so happy that this signing that was, I think, is 3 years, $24 million with like a $3 million bonus or something. It's all panning out. He's fitting the defense great. He's taking advantage of getting more reps, which you love to see. Obviously, he said that money did motivate him because he wanted to provide for his family. But look, man, he's also playing pretty dang motivated out there, and he's adding to a defensive line and defensive front that's already playing out of their minds, in my opinion.
And this is going to help a young secondary, because the more pressure this defensive line can get and the quicker they can get to the quarterback, the less time these young cornerbacks have to cover. And that's kind of what we're going to get into next, because it was kind of a rough day for the secondary outside of Kenny Moore the second. I thought Kenny Moore played a solid game, was just his normal Kenny Moore self, making tackles close to the line of scrimmage. There was one possession where Kenny Moore basically got the Colts defense off the field all by himself with multiple back-to-back plays of just taking things into his own hands, making good tackles, making good pass breakups. So I thought Kenny Moore solid again. You mentioned Julian Blackmon and his help in the tackling game, but rough day for Darrell Baker Jr., Dallas Flowers to an extent, but it was really, for me, the focus was on Darrell Baker Jr. It seemed like whenever CJ Stroud threw his way, it seemed like it was a completion and a positive game for the Texans. So not a game to remember for the young undrafted free agent corner in his second season. And this is where you kind of want to see what Juju Brents can have and when he can come back, because so far the preseason hype for Darrell Baker Jr. has not matched the regular season production.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I think that once the game got going, I mean, it really didn't matter if it was Tank Dell, it didn't matter if it was Nico Collins or Robert Woods. If he was over by the football, it just seemed like the catches were happening. Now, look, I do want to say this. This is a guy who's worked his ever-loving tail off, okay, to get to this point, and he's really shocked a lot of Colts fans, a lot of reporters, a lot of, writers like us, because he really just ascended out of nowhere. I mean, he just came out of nowhere, blew away Gus Bradley, and so he fit the scheme really well. And like you said, he was having a great preseason. We were just glowing about this guy. He also needs to be accounted a bad game. Okay, potentially. He could have just had an absolutely god-awful performance. Now, I will say you are concerned because it just seemed like nothing was working for him. And when the big one for me is the whiff tackle. I mean, he hand tackled Tank Dell, and Tank Dell's 5'9". Okay, he's shifty, but you can't go at somebody like a missile when they catch on the sideline. You got to break down and just make sure that you cut off the angle right there. Make him turn around and maybe take it back the opposite direction. You can't just run full speed, because all Tank Dell did was catch it, planted like Josh Downs did earlier in the game. He just goes flying by him like the wind, and he just almost walked into the end zone. So Darrell Baker needs to reassess this performance. I know that the Colts will be reassessing this performance, but also Rodney Thomas, Dallas Flowers, they also didn't have the best of games. There's a couple guys who just might have had bad games. You hope that that's the case, but yeah, Darrell Baker Jr. has some things to work on, and he's probably going to be reassessing some game tape this week.
And I don't think it really did the cornerbacks any favors by Gus Bradley kind of playing defense a little bit safe towards the end of the game. They really didn't want to allow things.
He
to
let
get,
them hang
get
around,
deep,
dude.
But yeah, that's something that we saw last year at times too. Was the Texans? I mean, while the game was never really in doubt in my eyes, the Colts also never fully pressed that foot all the way down. And that's something that I hope doesn't bite the Colts in the butt moving forward. It's definitely something that didn't help these cornerbacks because they were giving the wide receivers such a cushion. You would like to see Gus Bradley maybe play into the aggression of a Darrell Baker Jr. and a Dallas Flowers, both guys very aggressive cornerbacks that like to be physical. Maybe not so much when they're given a 10-yard cushion. And maybe that's just part of this of trying to feel out what this defense can do as well, what these guys' strengths are and how they're going to perform. So hopefully it's a learning experience for all of them. But overall, Drake, really good division win by the Indianapolis Colts this weekend. They're 1-1. It's been a while since we've said that the Colts are at 500. They're tied atop the AFC South standings with the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Tennessee Titans, so that's good to say as well. And gets an early season win, gets some momentum as they come up against a really tough 4-game stretch, because if you look ahead at Baltimore Ravens, which I will be there in Baltimore on Sunday, taking in the action, so can't wait to be there to see hopefully Anthony Richardson versus Lamar Jackson. Then they come home to play the Los Angeles Rams. They go that they play Tennessee the week after that, and then in Jacksonville. So a tough slate, 4-game slate for the Colts coming up.
Yeah, and think about that. I think it's is that week 6? That's week 6.
That'd be week 6, yes.
Okay, they will already have 4 of their 6 divisional games done.
Mm-hmm.
So that is, holy cow, 2 things. You want this efficient football on offense and defense to continue, and you want Anthony Richardson to return, because, boy, that's a grueling schedule with your divisional games.
Exactly. So let's look at the injury report from yesterday. We already obviously talked about Anthony Richardson is in the concussion protocol, and there was only one more injury to report, and that's Ryan Kelly. He left shortly before halftime, also with a concussion, so he will be going through the protocol as well. Thought Wesley French did an admirable job filling in for Ryan Kelly, but Ryan Kelly's had a really good season so far, and you don't want a concussion or an injury to start to derail that and set this offensive line back after a solid 2 games.
Yeah, and look, like you said, Wesley French came in. He played pretty good in relief, but you don't want that to continue. You want a guy who is literally the number 1 center in football based off of PFF standards and based off of many different standards. So, got to get Ryan Kelly back, but you're hoping with him and Anthony Richardson that these are just minor and that they get evaluated, get put out of the concussion protocol, and that they can return for Sunday, because it's a big game and they're going to need him to beat Baltimore.
Exactly. Obviously, we'll have more later this week when we preview the Colts-Ravens game. We'll give you all the latest on where these two stand within the concussion protocol. So, Drake, let's move it to the latest Colts news and rumors. And there was only really one to report on, but it was an interesting one. Jonathan Taylor sent out a video on his Instagram story on Friday of him running routes against air, making some cuts in the Colts indoor practice facility. I don't know about you, Drake, but that ankle looks pretty good to me. He was able to cut, making nice moves, didn't look like he was in any pain. He looked like the Jonathan Taylor of old. So that may mean that ankle injury is finally starting to heal up.
Yeah, and it's been 2 things that have been the drama between him and the Colts. It's been the contract thing and the ankle and the health of Jonathan Taylor. So if you can just get one of those out of the way so you can focus on the other, that's just going to move things along even faster and even more smoothly, because I think that you mentioned it, that it's kind of starting to get to more calmer waters. It's obviously still not this, oh, love you, man, love you right back, between the two, but they're at least moving in the right direction. So if you can get the ankle shored up, get that healthy, that's going to really make things a lot easier with getting a contract that he wants and that the Colts want. And like you said, he looked good in the video, made a really nice cut, and you hope that just continues so he gets on the field with Anthony Richardson.
Exactly. And you got remember this. So because Jonathan Taylor is on the physically unable to perform list, he cannot even practice with the team until after week 4, until after that 4th game is completed. So the very earliest we would be able to see Jonathan Taylor is week 5. From what I've been told as of right now, circle week 6, because it might take a week or a couple weeks of practice for Jonathan Taylor to get integrated into this offense. Remember, he has not been in a practice since last season when he was put on injured reserve. He did not do a single thing in training camp or OTAs, any of that. So it might take just a little bit for him to kind of get acclimated again. Might take a couple weeks of practice, but I've been told circle week 6 as of now. That could always change. Obviously, that's a month away. And if Jonathan Taylor shows a lot more progress, he could certainly be there in week 5, or if it takes a little bit more time, maybe it goes after week 6. But from what I've been told, circle week 6 that for a possible return for Jonathan Taylor to the Indianapolis Colts lineup. So Drake, let's close out this Victory Monday with doing one of our favorite segments, because usually we're talking about a good Colts player from the last week, the Colts Player of the Game. So this is, I know for your Colts Player of the Game, it's a guy that you were really excited to see back in a Colts uniform, see what he could do. Who is your Colts Player of the Game week 2 against the Texans?
Oh, this was hard, man, because they overall as a team played fantastic. So not easy to choose this, but I picked Zach Moss. I mean, the guy went out there. He was the only running back that did anything, literally. And he made the most of his opportunities as the only guy. So I think he fits Steichen's scheme well. I think he showed a little bit more versatility than typical, than he typically does, because he caught 4 passes, which, by the way, was tied with Josh Downs for second on the team behind the guy who always leads, Michael Pittman. And he played well in pass blocking too. I mean, he was back there blocking pretty decent. So I think if you're talking about Taylor returning, it would be real. I think we saw it in the chat. Somebody mentioned 1-2 punch. I mean, can you imagine those two as a 1-2 punch? That's fantastic for Anthony Richardson. It's even better for the entire team. So I love the way he played. 18 carries, 88 rushing yards, 4.9 average, a score, 4 catches for 19 receiving yards. You got to love to see it. And he's making a great case to stay here past just this year, because I think it's a contract season for him.
Yeah, exactly. It is. So Zach Moss, I mean, if Jonathan Taylor gets a big contract in Indy, Zach Moss is probably going elsewhere. However, if Jonathan Taylor goes elsewhere, maybe Zach Moss is the one that sticks around at Indy for the long term. Stats Matt gives his player of the game to Grover Stewart. He was a monster. Do not disagree there, Stats Matt. And it also says that Rigoberto Sanchez looked better. Rigo did look much better in week 2. But for my player of the game, it's the guy that came in relief duty and kept this offense afloat. It's Gardner Minshew. Minshew mania is alive and well. As Price said, Minshew magic, baby, is his player of the game. 19 of 23, 171 yards, and the touchdown to Kylan Granson. I'll give him another shout out since I gave
that was almost my player of the game right there.
Since I gave him such a hard time for not catching a touchdown, I got to give the kid his props. But again, this is exactly why you bring Gardner Minshew to the Indianapolis Colts, so that way you have a solid backup quarterback who knows the system and is able to go into the game in a pinch and keep the offense afloat. And as we saw on Sunday, even win you the game. So that's our show for this evening, guys. Really, really appreciate everybody who tuned in and talked some Colts football on this Victory Monday. Special shout out to our lone super chat of the evening was the CFO himself, Patrick Rye. As always, just an absolute legend. And he, for his player of the game, Stewart's glorious mane. It's his player of the game never changes. Patrick, continue with those fantastic chats that you always send. But we really appreciate everybody else who tuned in, participated in the chat, and what makes this show so much fun. And if you haven't done so already, please follow us on all of our socials, like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook, follow at Colts on FN on X, and subscribe to the Horseshoe Huddle YouTube channel and hit that bell so you never miss us going live. And if you can't catch us live, Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you listen to podcasts, we're on there as well. So make sure you subscribe and give us a 5-star review. So Drake, horseshoehuddle.com is where we've been throwing all of our content on there. And guys, we're on pace for another record-breaking month. So thank you all so much for everyone who supports our written work on the site as well. What can the people go check out that you've written over the past few days?
So I did my series that I do post game every game for the season is going to be the 3 good, the 3 bad. So go check that out on the Texans. It pretty much matches our outline, but I go our outline for this episode, but I go more in depth. Zach Moss was impressive, so that's another piece that I wrote. And then also, is Jonathan Taylor potentially eyeing a return? And I talk about how now they can focus on the contract. And I actually talk about the cut that he had on his video in that piece as well. So go check those out.
Excellent pieces. Go check those out. For myself, I did have a piece on DeForest Buckner on Friday morning and what the Colts defensive line was focusing against the Texans. But then last night, it was all about Anthony Richardson and how he has to learn how to protect himself and fast if he wants a long career with the Indianapolis Colts. But hey, don't forget on Wednesday morning, all AR5 film series is back. So I will be throwing up, even though it wasn't for long, I will still be doing a film review on Anthony Richardson's hot start against the Houston Texans. So make sure you check those articles out and all of the fantastic pieces done by the people at horseshoehuddle.com. Go follow Drake on X at DWalsterDrake. You can follow me at Andrew Moore NFL, and we will be back Thursday night to get you all set for the Week 3 matchup as the Colts head to Baltimore back to take their old home away, I should say, as they return to Baltimore and face the Ravens. Will we be seeing Anthony Richardson and Lamar Jackson? We certainly hope so. So until Thursday evening, go enjoy a doubleheader on Monday Night Football and enjoy the rest of your Victory Monday, Colts fans. We'll be seeing you.